no way that you could come from my loins. That's an attention getter.
Smokey and the Bandit was a box office phenomenon, a southern rebellion with a distinctive flavour that few films could replicate, shouts, blaring sirens and endless high-speed chases. But what happened off-camera was the real madness. The crew nearly got arrested by police due to a bizarre misunderstanding. 4 cars got literally wrecked, the studio despised the film, and our female lead almost wasn't the one you know. And here are 20 things about Smokey and the Bandit you've never heard before. The insane but true story. Coors beer and smuggling crimes. A truck full of Coors beer, a reckless driver, a cross-state police chase. Do you think that's just a Hollywood script? But in the 1970s, smuggling Coors beer was a real crime and even more dangerous than what you see on screen. Back then, Coors was unpasteurized and contained no preservatives, so it had to be kept continuously cold. This made transporting it out of the American West almost impossible. East of the Mississippi River, Coors was almost a legendary item you couldn't find in supermarkets or bars. To get a can, you had to find someone daring enough to take the risk. And that's precisely why Smokey and the Bandit was born. While transporting beer to the film set, they were stopped by the police. When they realised the bizarre truth that a type of beer could become contraband, they decided to turn it into a movie. Coors was once a sought-after black market commodity, especially in the American South. People actually stole it, hid it, and even got into fights just to get a taste. So the movie's opening scene where Burt Reynolds' character speeds away from the police wasn't an exaggeration. It was a documentary in disguise, except the driver wore a cowboy hat and knew how to smile at the right time. But if you think that's the craziest part, wait until you hear what happened when the film crew tried to reenact that very chase in real life, it says. The entire crew was once arrested by police for being too realistic. In one scene, the Smokey and the Bandit film crew decided to film a chase on an empty stretch of highway. No barriers, no warnings, just cars speeding like rockets and engines roaring. Everything was so realistic that a real police officer who happened to be driving by believed he had caught an illegal street race in the act. Without a moment's hesitation, he turned on his sirens, sped into the middle of the shot, and shouted like in a real action movie. The stunt team froze, and a few people tried to flee. The chaos lasted only a few seconds. It took quite a while, with the intervention of the director and his assistants, for the officer to believe he had mistakenly interrupted a film shoot. The scene had to be reshot, but the entire crew had a memorable and terrifying experience. And if you think that almost arrested moment was the only shock on set, just wait. Imagine you're struggling with a tight budget and a quarter of the film's money was spent on just one person. Who could be that powerful? Burt Reynolds' salary accounted for 25% of the budget. In 1977, when Smokey and the Bandit was about to begin production, Burt Reynolds was at the peak of his fame. This position allowed him to negotiate a fee far beyond all standards, over $1 million, accounting for 25% of Universal's initial $5.3 million total budget. This enormous salary created a tense atmosphere and a lot of grumbling on set. However, Burt Reynolds showed up every day with a confident and charismatic demeanour, ignoring the uncomfortable stares around him. When Universal unexpectedly cut the budget mid-production, Reynolds was unfazed. He issued a short but powerful ultimatum. "If I leave, this movie is dead." The studio was forced to concede. Thanks to his persistence, the film was not only completed, but also became the second highest grossing film of 1977. So what made the film feel so real that audiences were completely drawn into every frame? To create this authenticity, the director did the craziest things. The crew didn't use special effects. Everything was real. Did you know that to create the breathtaking chase scenes in the film, the crew didn't use any CGI or digital tricks? It was all just tyres, dirt, and daring stunts. Burt Reynolds didn't just sit behind the wheel of the Trans Am. He personally performed many high-speed stunts despite the studio's objections. He pushed the limits to give the audience the most authentic feeling possible. From daring car jumps to narrow escapes, everything was real. Every scratch, every skid, every flying fender on screen accurately reflects what happened in real life. The danger was real, the sweat was real. And this boldness is what created the film's timeless appeal. But amidst the crazy turns and clouds of dust covering the screen, something else very romantic was happening on set. The two main actors fell in love in real life and had an unexpected ending. Do you know why Burt Reynolds and Sally Field had such great chemistry? Because they were actually a couple in real life. Behind the scenes, they shared a trailer, improvised lines, and laughed non-stop. Their love blossomed right from the beginning of filming, contributing to the movie's intense vitality. In her autobiography, In Pieces 2018, Sally Field recounted how fiercely Burt pursued her. He would call up to 10 times a day, send flowers and letters, and drive across states just to see her. They were together for nearly 5 years, starred in several more films together, and were considered Hollywood's golden couple at the time. However, this romance did not have a happy ending. The relationship, which had many on-again, off-again moments over the years, eventually broke down. But while a love story blossomed off-camera, another source of comedy came from a character who seemed like a minor element. Most of the sheriff's lines were not in the script. Can you believe it? About 75% of Jackie Gleason's lines as Sheriff Buford T. Justice were completely unscripted. No practice, no repetitive rehearsals. After just one script read, Gleason walked onto the set and let his instincts guide everything. With his sharp wit, Gleason improvised and bantered with his co-stars, creating incredibly authentic and hilarious situations. Director Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds both confirmed that Gleason only read the script once and improvised the rest. This kept the atmosphere on set full of surprises, as no one knew what he would say next. One of the film's most iconic lines, "There ain't no way that you came from my loins," was thought up by Gleason on the spot, even making Burt Reynolds laugh. With his outstanding improvisational talent, Jackie Gleason didn't just play the sheriff. He became the character, bringing a unique life to the film. But while Jackie Gleason made the whole crew hold their breath with every unpredictable line in another corner of Hollywood, an actress was struggling to seize an opportunity that almost slipped through her fingers. Sally Field was almost rejected if not for the help of another person. When the casting process began, studio executives flatly rejected the name Sally Field. "She's not sexy enough, not right for a Southern leading lady," they said. In their eyes, Sally was just a small girl lacking box office appeal. But Burt Reynolds saw something different. He not only believed in her acting ability, but also saw a light that those behind the boardroom table had never understood: her intelligence, subtle charm, and an authentic heart. Burt fought to the end, ready to gamble his reputation as an A-list star to get the role for Sally. And he won. That bold choice not only gave the film a perfect actress, but also ignited one of Hollywood's most famous romances. In another corner, there was a person who was not on the initial casting list, but somehow miraculously stepped onto the screen and became an irreplaceable icon. Jerry Reed was the last choice, but became a legend. Did you know Jerry Reed wasn't the first choice for the role of Snowman? In fact, he was only cast the night before filming began. The studio had contacted a long list of famous musicians and actors, but they were all rejected or failed. When time ran out, Burt Reynolds personally called and insisted on Jerry Reed not just for his acting ability, but also for his amazing songwriting skills. Arriving on set with no time to prepare, Reed put on his cowboy hat, brought his guitar, and got to work. It was during this time that he composed and recorded the song Eastbound and Down right on set. What seemed like a temporary solution became a moment that changed cinematic history. Reed didn't just play a trucker, he brought the beat, the soul, and the free spirit of the American South into every frame. Because there was another star who had no agent and didn't even understand he was in a movie. Can you guess who the next star was? The fun fact behind the dog, Fred. Due to the tight budget for Smokey and the Bandit, the film crew didn't hire a professional dog trainer. Instead, they held a small competition in the area with Burt Reynolds personally serving as the judge. Many dogs were considered, but at the very last minute, just a night before filming, Burt called and suggested they choose Fred the Basset Hound, who won the competition. Fred stood out for an unexpected reason: he didn't follow any commands. This breaking of the script perfectly matched the easygoing and impulsive nature of the snowman character, leading Burt Reynolds to stick with his choice. And just like that, a four-legged star was born. But do you think that's the strangest behind-the-scenes detail? There's something even more surprising that comes from a famous line. The phrase, "son of a," was actually a mispronunciation by a real-life person. Did you know that the character name Buford T. Justice and his signature line were inspired by a real person? Burt Reynolds' father, a former police chief in Riviera Beach, Florida, once knew a highway patrolman who had a habit of mispronouncing son of a bitch as some bitch, a rugged, distinctive southern variation. Jackie Gleason, who played Buford T. Justice, incorporated this phrase into the script, turning it into one of the film's most classic lines. What's special is that this line was not in the original script, but was completely improvised by Gleason. But that's not the most interesting thing yet. There's another surprise, and it comes from the film's legendary car. The sound of the Trans Am was actually from a different car. If you thought the engine sound of the Trans Am in the movie didn't sound like a real Trans Am, you were right. To create the powerful sound for Bandit's car, the film crew used the sound effects of a different vehicle. Specifically, it was a 1955 Chevrolet Custom, which had appeared in classic films like Two-Lane Blacktop and American Graffiti. But that's still not the weirdest thing. A strange secret code kept appearing on set, and it always coincided with a major star being in a non-sober state. Jackie Gleason's mysterious drunk code. Jackie Gleason was not only a comedic genius, but also famous for his drinking habits. However, instead of bluntly asking for a glass of bourbon, he used a secret code word. Whenever he wanted a drink, he would ask his assistant Mal for a hamburger. This code, initially kept private, quickly became common among the crew and was even used by everyone. But don't think the hamburger trick was the strangest thing about Jackie Gleason, because what's next will astound you even more about the film's most ridiculous character. The most annoying sheriff on screen, was actually real. Sheriff Buford T. Justice was not a product of imagination. The character was inspired by a real man, a Florida highway patrolman Jackie Gleason met during a traffic stop. The man was loud, rude, but had a strange charm, and Gleason never forgot him. To fully embody the role, Gleason even invited a real-life Southern sheriff to the set to study his accent, attitude, and demeanour. The result was not a ridiculous cartoon character, but a strangely authentic, exaggerated version of a real law enforcement officer. Buford T. Justice was not born from a script. He was pulled from the dirt roads of the American South and put straight into cinematic history. But if you think the chaos only came from the people, then you haven't heard the haunting story about the Trans Ams, the speed stars. Not a single Trans Am made it to the end of the film intact. Pontiac generously provided 4 brand new Trans Ams for the film crew, but no one expected them all to be wrecked so quickly. The breathtaking chases, daring jumps and continuous collisions left all 4 cars deformed one by one. The chassis bent, the suspension cracked, and some cars couldn't even move after each scene. When the supply of cars ran out, the film crew had to scramble to keep this 4-wheeled protagonist alive. From replacing parts with old components, repainting scratches, to using duct tape, they held it together with both desperation and creativity. So every time you see the shiny black Trans Am zoom across the screen, know that it's not just a symbol of speed, it's the result of a behind-the-scenes battle to keep it alive long enough to shoot the final scenes. But if you think the car damage was the worst thing that happened on set, wait until you hear that the studio once wanted to kill the whole project. The studio demanded budget cuts, thinking the film would fail. From the very beginning, Universal executives didn't believe in Smokey and the Bandit. They saw it as a low-brow comedy with a plot only suitable for audiences in the American South, and they were sure it would fail. Mid-production, the studio cut the budget staff and tightened the schedule, forcing the entire crew to struggle to finish the project. Burt Reynolds, Jackie Gleason and the team had to be creative, using everything they could to continue. They reused locations, compressed shots, and sometimes just went with their instincts. The result was ironic. Smokey and the Bandit was not only a success, but became one of the highest-grossing films of 1977, surpassing acclaimed works like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Annie Hall. The studio had given up on the movie, but the audience didn't. However, if you think Smokey and the Bandit had a cheerful spirit from start to finish, you'll be surprised by the original ending, dark, heavy, and completely different from what you saw on screen. The film's original ending was darker than you think. Few people know that the ending you see in Smokey and the Bandit, with Bandit and Snowman laughing as they drive ready for a new journey, was not the original ending. In the original draft, the film ended on a somber note. Bandit was forced to face the consequences of his reckless chases, the law chasing him, and an outlaw life he couldn't escape forever. That ending was dark, reflecting a heavy reality that was completely opposite to the film's free-spirited nature. As they got close to shooting the final scene, something made the entire crew pause. They felt the ending wasn't right. It lacked laughter and excitement. They all shared the same feeling this wasn't why they loved the movie. And so they made a bold decision. They scrapped the old script. And what we see is a bright, laughter-filled ending that is truly a Southern legend. But even with a new, fun and spirited ending, not everyone was smiling. Because when the film was released, the first people to judge it were not the audience, but the film critics. Critics scorned the film and called it outdated. When Smokey and the Bandit was released, critics were openly dismissive. Roger Ebert gave the film 2 stars, while others called it stupid, outdated and disposable. However, the audience had a completely different reaction. The film exploded at the box office, grossing over $120 million and becoming the second highest-grossing film of 1977, second only to the blockbuster Star Wars. But there was one thing the critics couldn't have predicted. The film created a craze, not just at the box office, but also at car dealerships across America. Trans Am sales soared to a record high after the film's release. Pontiac generously gave away 4 free Trans Ams to the film crew, but they had no idea this decision would create a cultural phenomenon. After Smokey and the Bandit was released, Trans Am sales skyrocketed. From around 27,000 units in 1975, the number rose to 68,744 in 1977, and reached a record high of 117,108 in 1979, a spectacular growth. The Black and Gold 1977. Trans Am, thanks to its appearance in the film, became one of the most legendary cars on screen. It became a symbol of rebellion, speed and coolness. To this day, the car remains one of the most beloved cinematic icons because Burt Reynolds made it look like it could fly. And perhaps the most surprising thing is this: the film's enthusiasts weren't just Southern audiences, they also included a famous figure. A legendary director was a huge fan of the film. Among the millions of Smokey and the Bandit fans, there's one name that surprises everyone the most. Director Alfred Hitchcock. Yes, the master of suspense, the man behind masterpieces like Psycho and Vertigo. According to crew members, Hitchcock watched the film multiple times. He praised it for its fast-paced, high energy and humorous storytelling, even calling it a perfect piece of American cinema. This shows that the appeal of Smokey and the Bandit transcended all genres and preconceptions. However, behind the cheerful laughter, there was one detail that gave the entire crew a headache, and it was the voice of the film's most ridiculous character. The sheriff's voice was a huge problem. When the film was edited for primetime television broadcast, Jackie Gleason's swear words were deemed too vulgar. The studio faced a dilemma: how to keep the character of Buford without making parents turn off the TV. The surprising solution was to invite Mel Blanc, the legendary voice actor behind cartoon characters like Fred Flintstone and Bugs Bunny, to re-record Gleason's voice. The result was a hot-tempered, angry sheriff with the voice of a Saturday morning cartoon character. For audiences who only watched the TV version, they never got to fully experience the fire that Jackie Gleason poured into the original dialogue. While the theatrical version was full of the rebellious spirit of the South, the TV version felt like a cartoon chase. And so, Smokey and the Bandit was not just a chase comedy. It became a cultural phenomenon where a sumbitch sheriff could suddenly talk like Fred Flintstone, and the audience didn't even realise anything strange was happening. You probably never expected a chase comedy to have so many strange stories behind it. So what detail shocked or amused you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments and follow the channel to discover more never-before-revealed truths from behind the scenes of Hollywood.